Welcome to Wellness as a Way of Life, the podcast for female leaders seeking sustainable energy, clarity, and confidence. I'm Megan Swan, your guide on a journey to mastering wellness as an integrated part of your life. Let's explore personalized wellness strategies that truly resonate with who you are. Welcome back to Wellness as a Way of Life. Today, I'm so excited to interview Michelle McIvor. She is a freelance journalist and the author of the national bestseller, which I just devoured, The Glow Code, a cheat sheet for feeling, looking, and being your best at any age. She has ghostwritten 2 books, including the #1 Canadian bestseller, Forever Terry, A Legacy in Letters. As a former health columnist with the Calgary Herald, Michelle wrote about everything from emerging wellness trends and new research to her experiences exercising with a personal trainer, giving up alcohol for a trial period. I might delve into that a little bit too, and more. Michelle's writing has also appeared in publications such as Maclean's, Reader's Digest, Best Health, and Chatelaine, as well as AskMen.com. Her storytelling skills inspire Michelle's work as a communication professional through her consultancy called adorable name Word Boutique. She helps entrepreneurs and organizations tell their stories. But today we're really going to focus on her story. Welcome, Michelle. How are you?
I'm great. Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Loved reading your book. And I really felt like a friend. Like, I don't know how intentional that was that you wrote it like girl talk.
I'm so glad you felt that way. It was intentional. I wanted to feel like you were sitting down with a friend over a cup of tea or a glass of rosé and just chatting about the things you would normally chat about. And even though it was an intentional choice to write it that way, I have to say that's always been my writing style. That's my preference, is to be very relatable and approachable and hopefully a little witty to make people laugh.
Yeah, very witty, very warm. And I loved sort of I wanted to ask because we met at an event that was very much perimenopause, like calling out that phase of life or that part of aging, if you will. And correct me if I'm wrong, I feel like you don't really call that out in the book. It's just sort of like a more like softer, let's do all the things, just look better and feel better as we're aging.
That is so right. And that was a choice I made early on because I felt like there are some incredible books out there for women who are specifically looking for scientific advice on perimenopause and menopause. And I thought my interests were a bit adjacent, but also happened to overlap with this time of life. So I decided not to focus too much on the hormones. And, it does come up in aspects like in the sleep chapter, in other ways, you talk about how your hormones are affecting things like maybe your sex drive or things like that. But it was a choice to not delve too deep into that.
Yeah. So paint the picture. I believe you wrote it during COVID. Like how did you decide to go about it? And I love that you kind of like put all of these recommendations to the test and share your experience. So it's that much more relatable.
Thanks. Yeah, that was a fun part of it for sure, was having the time to put the advice into action in my life. So yes, I started, I think, in 2021, and I just had decided at the time, I was almost 40. I felt like a lot was changing in my life, and I still had all these questions. And I was also challenging my own thoughts and beliefs about aging because I felt like some of them were at odds with my belief that aging is a privilege. I really do believe that. But I was like, why am I feeling bad about this gray eyebrow hair or whatever? So it really caused me to get introspective. And I decided then that if I was feeling that way, a lot of other women probably were too. And so I thought we needed this cheat sheet to help cut through all the white noise, misinformation, and fads that are really aimed at women, to offer us all simple but effective advice we could all easily implement and use. And so that's when I decided to write this book, to help us feel and live well for as long as possible, and also hopefully to help us appreciate the journey.
Yeah. Well, some of my favorite chapters, I love how you did a deep dive on a whole chapter on skin, a whole chapter on like how to put your makeup on better essentially and not look like, or not put it on like you did when you were in your 20s, appreciate that's not going to work. And yeah, there's a chapter on libido. There's a chapter on building muscle, or is it just like feeling better? But I have immediately, ordered like heavier weights. I'd been using 10 and 15. So now I'm using 25 and 30s, building muscle. But yeah, the one I really wanted to ask you about because I think it resonates sort of across ages. And you talk about how friendship evolves, or how we look at this concept of friendship that maybe in our 20s we had one perception of what equates a good friend. Yeah, that maybe needs to be updated or more flexible.
Flexible is a good word. It also comes into play when we think about viewing our friendships as flexible rather than fragile. That's something an expert shared with me, because you're right. I was really struggling with my friendships. I would say my historical friendships and how they were changing as we headed into our 40s. It felt like we used to have this really close knit family, and that had changed for me anyway. I felt like I was a bit more on the outside of it. At the same time, I had made other friends. So it was just this evolving friend landscape. And I felt kind of more at ease and relieved to learn that happens for most people. Anyone experiencing life change, whether in your 30s, 40s, or 60s, or beyond, will experience friendship losses and transitions many times over. And so that made me feel a little less alone in that struggle. And it's interesting, I did say at that event where we met that this is the chapter I've heard the most about from readers. I've had many women reach out and say, I relate to this. I needed the skills in this chapter. I started new friendships or rekindled old friendships, sometimes even ending friendships that weren't serving them anymore. So that's been a really validating thing, because I have to say, I dreaded writing this chapter, even though I knew I wanted to write it. I felt like it was almost more personal than writing about my sex life with my husband, which was crazy. But I felt like writing about friendships was very daunting. I just didn't want to hurt anyone. I didn't want to, portray anything incorrectly. And I was just really struggling with that. So it's been really nice to hear from women that they needed this chapter.
Yeah. Well, and I mean, am I right that you've mostly grown up and like you're lived in the same city for your whole life, right? So I think
Yeah.
it resonated with me for a couple reasons, but I think I've certainly arrived in city. I've lived in different cities and countries, and I've arrived in places that are a certain size, and you really get the impression that a lot of people are still friends with their elementary and university. Like it's just, they're not necessarily needing new friends because they have like the same cohort and they've really stuck together. And, I'm not sure, it's not universal small town, but I feel like Calgary's a big enough city there's some of that, but then also it's very international and there's lots of new people and lots of turn, if you will, and opportunities to make new friends. And yeah, for me, like the pandemic in that sense was a bit of a blessing because it just kind of forced me in this small town that no one's ever heard of, that I was living in Mexico for the last 15 years.
Right.
To go online and find new friends and groups and social opportunities, specifically in the sober community. So I'd love to know, let's tie it back to, how did you think when you were reaching out to the experts, if you will? Was that like a network of your friendships to any extent, or your relationships, or was it really you just sort of handpicked people that you wanted to lead as experts?
Oh, yeah. Good question. I would say I did start, like, we know the power of network. I started with my network. And so I did reach out to someone I'd interviewed many times before. His name is John Berardi. He founded Precision Nutrition. He's a well-respected authority in that space. And so I just said, hey, I'm going to be writing this book. I would love to pick your brain. And he was fantastic to then introduce me to some incredible female experts. So in the end, I ended up interviewing just about 40 people, and 35 of the 37 that are quoted in my book are women, because I thought, who better to understand the journey? But I would say I just started with John and then those few interviews, but then it really went from there. And you know what is amazing about women, uplifting women, is so many of the interviews I had would end with that interviewee saying, who you should chat with is this person in North Carolina who's running a lab for women. And I'll send an email introducing you, or, they just kept growing from there. So it was an effort, a bit of tapping into a few people from my network, but then also just following the seeds that people would plant for me. and also then researching and doing a lot of cold calls. I would send cold call emails to experts that I thought, oh, I really have to talk to this woman after I'd read about her and her work. And so thankfully, many people said yes.
Amazing. And so have you become friends with any of the experts?
Oh, yeah, great question. Well, I would say I knew a few people here in Calgary who I reached out to interview. And if we had a bit of a relationship before, I'd say some of those have grown into stronger friendships now because we are obviously in the same city and have the opportunity to connect. Stacey Irvin is one of the skincare experts I quote in the skin chapter, and I adore her. That's just one example of someone that, I've seen. We've walked the memorial stairs together for a workout. We keep in touch, and I really appreciate that friendship. So it's nice to have that ability to stay in touch. And I wish more of my experts were close by, but it is like any good friendship, I guess, like we delved into a little bit in the book is, if you can view them as flexible, even if they're not in the same city as you, then your friendships are more likely to sustain. So I kind of think about all my interviewees that way is, oh, hopefully we can reconnect at some point and just pick up where we left off.
Yeah. And I love that tip in that chapter that, I think sort of out of default, a lot of moms are already doing it, but like, how can I make spending time with a friend like multitasking essentially? Like,
Yeah, that was a good tip. It's like we are also pressed for time. So if you want to see your friends more, can you invite them along to something you're already doing, like having a work date at a coffee shop?
yeah. So let's dovetail a little bit into your experimentation. Is there a whole chapter on alcohol or is it no? I feel
Oh,
like you've titled it differently. It's kind of,
yes. It's about taming your bad habits. And I say
there we
right up
go.
front that alcohol is my vice. Yes.
But
Yeah.
I love how your transparency because I think it's so relatable, particularly like the journey during the pandemic. I mean, it was just like, at least in North America, like this massive uptick and then this massive shift. And now the non-alcoholic beverage industry is just exploding because people like options, like I do like that you came around to essentially, you know, reconsidering your relationship in a way that fits better with, your current goals or the way that you want to feel.
Yes. Yeah. That was a good chapter to write because I did want to reevaluate, just like I was thinking about how I thought about aging. I was thinking about how I was interacting with alcohol. And like you said, over the pandemic, my husband and I got into the habit of celebrating just getting through a Tuesday, with a gin and tonic, which we didn't need to do. So it's been a good process of, yeah, I would say just putting the thought and intention behind it and then trying to tame that habit in a way that makes sense. I still have alcohol. I try to choose my spots. And like any habit, I feel like I'm probably not perfect, but I'm trying. And I think just having that intention in mind, like anything, helps you stay the course.
Yeah, and now that I'm thinking about it, I really like that you wrote that chapter sort of general because I was thinking a lot of your tips do apply to, like someone who's trying to eat less sugar,
Mhm.
just stop buying all of the snacks with sugar or at the
Yeah.
very least, like don't have them front and center on your counter, like make it a little bit harder.
Yes, exactly. Because it is, those habits are, as I learned, it's almost like a survival mechanism in your brain. Like once your brain gets a shot of dopamine and thinks, oh, this is a good thing, it makes me feel good, then it's very hard to override it. So if you can remove that trigger from your life as much as possible, even, if you're a gambler, avoiding the way home that takes you by a casino, all those tips of just trying to remove it from your life, you are setting yourself up for success for sure.
Yeah. Well, tomorrow, in fact, I'm celebrating 7 years sober. I completely quit, 7 years ago. And I seem to remember that you mentioned 7 year cycles of
Oh,
these
yeah.
friendships, right? And so there's like a lot of magic both in nature and like in the spiritual world of this number. And it made so much sense to me that your relationships tend to sort of cycle in and out of 7 years. And, you shared at Glow Up that at first it's kind of maybe like some of your oldest, dearest friends are like, and then you use this analogy of like, okay, well, if you were going to get married again today, who would your bridesmaids be? And probably, they wouldn't be the same people if you got married, not last year.
It's so true. When you think about it like that, it does seem Like it makes sense, right? Like, yeah, who are the 5 people now versus who are the 5 people being your wedding party 7 years ago? And most likely a couple are different. And I think the powerful reminder there is that we should all be invested in nurturing friendships at different levels, because it's almost like building a friend pipeline where you have friendships growing in significance in your life and ready to be there for you, right? At varying levels. And it's just the way it is. As we get older too, we are all going through so much change. And as one expert said, it's like anyone going through a life change is called a transitioner, which, might bring upheaval in your life, but that's also a really good opportunity. Like you said, for you, the change or the catalyst was COVID, and it forced you to reach out and build a new network or grow your network. And I think transition is a really good time for people because, yeah, in those moments of transition, we are often more open to new relationships. Anyone weathering a divorce or moving cities, like, anything like that, it's a good opportunity because you're likely to find other transitioners.
Yeah. And I think it's so important, the piece that you point out, like just because a relationship isn't sort of like the front center at the moment doesn't mean, or, really shouldn't just discount that you're not gonna come back around, like there's, in that sense, it really is cycles, or can be, not just like, okay, doesn't need to have like a breakup conversation per se.
You're right. That sounds like a relief to me to learn that too, that because relationships and especially friendships or any relationship, I guess, will go through ebbs and flows. When you're in the ebb, if you assume it's over, it's almost like a self-fulfilling prophecy. Whereas if you think, no, there'll be a time in the future when we can reconnect, you are more likely to sustain that friendship. So it is kind of, I think, adjusting and maybe like loosening the reins a little if you're feeling really stressed. And also then being proactive. And there are ways to boost your connection. Obviously, like time is one, but even just focusing on raising positivity in a friendship, there are 3 elements kind of that are essential for a friendship, according to one expert I interviewed. And they were positivity, consistency, and vulnerability. And so if you could just focus on one, the primary takeaway I took from this expert was that we should all be focused on positivity because many women feel like they're lacking that in their friendships.
Mhm.
And friendships that are low in positivity will eventually erode. So it's super easy. It's like commenting on your friend's social media post, sending her a quick text, telling her you love her or proud of her or you're happy you're friends. Like all of those things raise the positivity and will help your friendship flourish.
Yeah, I love that you shared that. And I think it's so true. And I don't know if this is more true, like I'll just speak for myself. Like it's hard. Sometimes you get caught up in this, like whose turn it is, and then it goes on for you.
Yes.
Instead of just being like, okay, I'm the person that's thinking I should reach out, just reach out.
That is so true. I know you kind of keep a tally or I've done this or they've done that announcement. But it is kind of nice just to be like, if you're thinking about someone and they're on your mind, it's nice to reach out and be that person. And also, even if you're not the person who generally is good at consistency in a friendship, one expert recommended just thanking your friend for being that person in your relationship. Thank you for setting up our coffee date. Thank you for reaching out and planning dinners. I appreciate that. And that goes a long way too, because I do know there are some relationships I have where I feel like I'm the one doing that heavy lifting. And it is nice when someone's like, hey, thank you. I appreciate that.
Yeah. And I think it's important, like you say, to understand that that's to some degree just personality types. It's not
Mhm.
intentional. Yeah. And of course, like with lifelong friends, you know who they are, that you need to be the one that's chiming in or doing the planning. And the positivity piece, I think, is so important. I mean, I always, one of the key tools, certainly in entrepreneurship, is really being conscious of who's, your power squad. Who are the 5 people that you're spending the most time with, let's say. You really want them to be high vibe. You don't want them to be people that are reminding you of all the shitty things that you did in your 20s, or like, these people that are allowing you to evolve.
I think that is so key. You're right. Surrounding yourself with the people that really restore you, are uplifting to you, like fill your tank as opposed to draining it, because it's so easy to get stuck in that type of relationship where you feel like you're the person who's sacrificing, I think, for whatever reason, loyalty or you have history or whatever. But part of getting older is becoming more self assured and knowing what you need. And so I think it's a great time actually in midlife to reassess those relationships, especially like you said, the power squad. Do you have the right people there? Because that's so important for your own well-being.
The last thing I want to talk about in terms of friendship is managing expectations. And I think that could just be so powerful in itself. As you're older, as you know, you and I are both moms, just understanding that, you know, maybe seeing each other once a year is great. You know, like that doesn't mean that the friendship's over or it's, you know, it's dying. And just being, I think, bringing compassion and grace to what it needs to look like at this stage.
Yes, that was my biggest aha moment. And I totally agree with you. Like lowering expectations is something I hadn't really considered in a friendship. And it has worked very well for me with some of my, I would say, older friendships where we don't see each other that often anymore, simply because we're just not doing life together. I don't think there was no big fallout. Nothing really happened. It's just I had kids later than many of my friends in that group. You know, we live in different neighborhoods, we have different jobs, you know, all of these things contribute to us not doing life as much as we were together in our 20s. So lowering my expectations and just taking it for what it is, like really enjoying that yearly catch up at the Christmas party or whatever it is, made a huge difference in allowing me to relax into it and know that those people will be in my life. And maybe we will come back in a strong way into a great flow sometime. And if not, that's okay too. Like I'd rather have them in my life in that way than not at all.
Yeah, I love that. And I'd love to know of all the sort of advice that you got, or maybe experts that you interviewed, you tried it out and it didn't work. I mean, obviously we're not going to name names, but was there like some advice that you got that were like, nope, that is not true for me?
Yes, there was, yes. Well, you know, there was some advice. I started to write it for my sex chapter and I sent it to my agent. I was like, is this too way out there? And she's like, yes. So when and then but it made me laugh. The way I wrote it made me laugh, and I thought I'd make other people laugh. But one of the tips was, you know, in this quest to become more comfortable with ourselves, which is really important for enjoying intimacy and pleasure, you know, is being comfortable in your own body. One of the tips was to taste your menstrual blood. And I thought, you know, we had a long chat about it, and I get what she was saying. And she said, you know, I usually bring this up in, you know, workshop situations, and there's more background to just, hey, taste your own menstrual blood. But I thought, okay, I'm gonna do this for the sake of my book and my readers. I'm gonna do this. And I'm just, to preface it, cannot even stand, like if I cut my finger, I'm not sucking on my finger like blood. Like I hate blood.
Are
And
there people
so
that do that? I mean, again, probably.
yeah, I know. I was like, that's not me. But I thought I'm gonna try this. So then it came around that time and I was gonna do it. I was like, nope, no, 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 can't do it. And then I said, you know, I want to be your guinea pig readers, but like you might have to tackle this one on your own. So it was like things like that where it's like that didn't quite make it in. And I felt like that was more just entertainment than really adding value at that point. But there were a couple examples like that, like, and also an intimacy game where you're supposed to bite your partner and your partner bites you back. And there's like, you increase pressure. And then once you get to 7, you say 7, you don't even say stop. And that's meant to help you establish boundaries and get comfortable with saying not stop, but just, hey, that's enough. Is, you know, it's all this stuff. Yeah, I would say in the sex chapter.
I was going to say, so in summary, the next chapter was
Yeah, it was a bit of a, and I would say if anyone, you know, if they haven't read the book yet, there were things that worked really well in the sex chapter.
Yeah, no, it's a great chapter.
Advice, no. Yes.
It's a great chapter. And yeah, I think I agree with your editor. There's like, I think your demographic wouldn't have really resonated with the menstrual blood line.
Yeah.
Not even like painting with it now.
No.
That's like next level.
You're right. Yeah, yeah. There are some things out there. I'm glad you agree. And yeah, it's not in there, but it did make us laugh.
Amazing. So what was your favorite chapter to write?
You know, I think the fitness chapter was the very first chapter I wrote. And that was really exciting to me because I knew I was writing towards, you know, I had a book deal, I was working on it. And I would say the tips in that book have been transformative for me. You know, they've changed completely how I work out. I feel better than ever. So I feel really happy with how that one turned out. The one that was most surprising to me was the creativity chapter. I at first was struggling to find the right experts. And then when I chatted with them, I was very excited to try their advice. And there were some great tips in there, even about incorporating creative pulses into your day, like 10, 15 minutes you take a little breather from your work or whatever you're doing to tackle something that just brings you joy. It doesn't even have to be all that creative. It could be being in your garden for 10 minutes. And that has changed, I would say, the quality of my day in and day out. So that was a
Are you still
surprise I
knitting?
didn't see coming. Sorry?
Are you still knitting?
I am still knitting, but I'm struggling. I took a class on how to make a toque and I did it. And now I'm trying to recreate it at home and I can't do it. So
This is always one of those hobbies where it's like super trendy, and I just haven't. I keep thinking like maybe when I'm 50, I'll start that. Fair enough.
well, if you ever want to, we are in the same state. I'd be happy to have a little knitting time with you.
Oh, that'd be amazing. Yeah, well, to not to bury the lead, but I think most women would be shocked that the summary of the workout chapter is do less cardio, work, lift weights, essentially work out less. It just honestly just confirmed everything that I had naturally kind of come to over the last couple years.
Oh, great.
And gave me all of this scientific backing as to why it makes sense. So, to me, it was very validating. But I think for so many women, it would be a little shocking that
I think
we're
so.
just mostly all, at least how we were working out 20 years ago is completely backwards.
It was backwards. It was, cardio, long, steady state cardio for me anyways. And we're raised in that 80s mindset of, cardio is king for women who want to stay fit or lean or whatever that looks like to you. It is the reverse where it's like we should all be focused on strength training. I get excited. I have a 6-year-old daughter and she sees me lift weights at home. And I think how different it'll be for her seeing that and also knowing that. And I think, so many people are talking about it now. And some of the experts in my book, like Stacey Sims, are out there, trailblazing and spreading the word. But yeah,
I love her
strength
book, by the
training.
way. When I saw you were entering your,
Oh, good. I love her too. And she has changed things for me for sure. But now I do think of it as, strength training being the ultimate pro-aging tool. And that it's the one thing we need for sure. And then, yeah, cardio and other things you enjoy. I guess it comes down to how do you enjoy moving your body? But if you can make a change and incorporate strength training, and like you said, good for you for buying heavier weights. Like it does make a big difference. Like you, I was doing the same 10, 15 pounds for 12 to 15 reps, but now I try to lift a lot heavier and fewer reps. And yeah, it is amazing that I'm spending less time than before working out, but I feel much fitter and stronger. It's been great.
yeah. So other than buying the book, which you will share all of your links in the show notes, what else are you doing these days? And do you want people to connect with you?
Well, I would love for people to connect with me. Follow me on Instagram. I know you'll give all that information. Yes, buying the book is a huge support, but I love hearing from people. My email is also in the conclusion of my book. So if anyone wants to send a note, I would love that. Yeah, if anyone has read the book and can leave a review online, that's a huge support to me too. But yeah, aside from the book stuff, I'm looking to speak more. I had fun speaking at the Glow Up event, and I am a communications consultant. So reach out if you have any word needs through Word Boutique. And I'm just living life, I guess. We're about to go celebrate our 10-year wedding anniversary this weekend and just enjoying this phase of life with my family and my kids. It's really special.
Oh, congratulations on 10 years.
Thank you.
You made it past the 7-year itch.
That's right. So you're right. It's 7 years. It's a magical number.
Well, thank you so much for sharing your wisdom. Again, I really love the book. And yeah, I hope we can be some level of friends.
I would love that. We'll have to set up a coffee soon because I'd love to see you in person. But thank you again for having me. It's been really great.
Thanks, Michelle. Thanks for tuning in to Wellness is a Way of Life. Are you ready to make wellness a natural part of your routine? Let's stay connected. Go to meganswanwellness.com. Until next time, live well and thrive.